But the latest one, which you won't have seen before, is the Collective Mania volume, based on the conference that we had with the joint TSF and EFTSS conference last year, wasn't it, Collective Mania? It includes, half of the people in here are actually in this room. Then we had two keynote speeches at this particular conference, one from Martin on saving Bering Gould, and one from Brian on Stephe Harrop. Both of which were excellent, but I'm going to concentrate for the moment on the Stephe Harrop, because as you'll probably know, Harrop has come under a lot of criticism. All of you today are neo-fascists, according to Ross Cole, who has already been mentioned. So this is Brian reviewed that particular book, which I won't mention anymore, in the Folk Music Journal, but he also dissects it, I think is the good word, in this volume. That's why we've done an off-print of the of Brian's piece. So if you want to take one of these, if there's anybody you know that really needs to be recalibrated.
What it's like going around.
Yeah, exactly. Go knock on the door. Anyway, so quite seriously, the reason why we've done this off print is to get it out to all and sundry, rather than the few people who read Ballard Parkin's books. Seriously, if you know somebody, if you want to take some copies, if you want to give me your address, I can post you some, because we want it out there.
Lizzie knows Ross Cole.
Sorry? Yes.
Lizzie knows Ross Cole.
Yes.
I was already told off by Ross for an over-reliance on Steve Brown.
Yeah.
So.
I've sent him a copy of this. I'm going to say what happens. Anyway,
that's just remind you that this is all being recorded. Okay?
Yeah.
Hi, Ross.
The other thing, so changing the subject entirely, I forgot to mention earlier on. Tiffany Hoff is from FTS Vaughan Williams Memorial Library. Library and Archive Director is here with us today. So if anybody's got any questions or nice things to say about FTS, then please talk to Tiffany.
We're having another conference in the autumn, aren't we, about tunes?
Yes.
So just want to plug that, sort of tune scholarship, but tunes of songs, tunes, instrumental tunes, tunes in place could now come into that too, and tunes in the wider folk, sort of popular cultural sphere, musical sphere, whatever. So the call for papers is out now, and I think it's the end of June. The call,
Perhaps even tunes and dances.
Yes, indeed.
Any odd tunes will do. And Kath, we'd like Kath to say just a few words about the centre you are hosting us today.
Okay. Hi. I'm Kath Bannister, and I'm part of the Contemporary Folklore Research Centre, which is a partner in this event today. So just a little bit about the centre. It's been in existence since towards the end of 2023. It's based in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, and the director is Professor Fairfield. It's got a variety of projects under its umbrella, including Access Folk, that you may have heard of, which is to encourage and support and explore wider participation in folk singing. We have a collection of kind of like interest in folklore, particularly in contemporary expressions of folklore, and sort of contemporary uses of folklore. So as for what we do, we're sort of a group of people who we're not necessarily all academics. We're based at Sheffield, but we're very open, so our members and friends come from everywhere. We hold a regular reading group online, we hold regular socials, we host events like today, and we just exist to sort of promote and support folklore studies across the university and beyond. If you'd like to get in touch, the details are, there's some contact details there on the banner. There's the very folklorically sort of misspelt email address there.
Already
It's just
spotted
get
that. Already spotted that. Second.
Somebody got some proofreaders.
But there's also our social media details are also on the programme as well. So if you're interested in learning a bit more, check out our website. Maybe follow us on Blue Sky. We've got an Instagram account, and just see what we're getting up to. And I'd just also like to end by saying thank you ever so much, everybody, for coming along. And thank you hugely to Steve, to Martin, to Julia, and to Jess for organising such a lovely day. And enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
Richard's going to chair the next session.
If any of you don't know me, I'm Richard Spencer and I'm Martin's apprentice. So, without wasting any more time on this, I'd like to introduce Stephe Harrop from Liverpool Hope University, who's going to talk to us about song and storytelling performance.
Thank you. Everybody all right? Yes. Everybody have a nice lunch?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I feel it's always humane in the after lunch slot to just say, if you would like to close your eyes and listen in a meditative way, I won't be taking names and I won't be taking vengeance. You know, sometimes carbs need to have their way with us. So please listen in whatever way would make you comfy. Also, I'm just really delighted to be here, as you will hear. Traditional music is something I'm very keen on. I'm a fan, I'm an enthusiast. I'm not a specialist. My specialism sits in other places, so it's lovely to have the chance to spend some time with some people who really know what they're talking about. That is great. Also, just a little heads up, a multinational corporation software has decided that a random array of images in my presentation will not be visible. I don't know which ones yet, so let's play again. This is going to be a glorious adventure of me finding out what you can't see as we go along. To begin with, all that has been blanked out is my university's logo, so make what you will of that.
Just a placeholder.
Yeah,
Literally.
it's there in the PowerPoint, it's not in Google Slides. I uploaded it twice, but it wouldn't do it, so my apologies to Steph, because
It's all fine.
I've only just told her this little.
21st century issues, it's all fine. So, I mean, we've got the really important picture, because I thought, since you don't know me, I would start with my credentials. So, hello, I'm Stephe Harrop. I am a researcher, a teacher, a storyteller, and the storytelling and the research kind of imbricate one another. Yeah, let's get that word in early. And then I won't use it again. So I'm fortunate enough that my creative life and my research life kind of intersect in that way. This is a book modestly titled Contemporary Storytelling Performance, which came out in 2023, I think. In which, and Lizzie's paper was making me think of this, in which I took advantage of the fact that I happened to be friends with an amazing group of kind of female storytelling artists to kind of try and document some of that network of creative interplay in a contemporary context. But the real reason I'm showing you this is, I mean, I could spend the rest of the afternoon going through the arguments about how we're defining storytelling, but I won't. The way I define contemporary storytelling is as a traditionally inspired art form. So it's a contemporary spoken word practice, but it is not traditional in the sense that we can trace a lineage of practitioners kind of in an unbroken way. So contemporary storytellers are contemporary spoken word performance makers. We draw inspiration from and we aim to pay some kind of homage and respect to the oral storytellers of the past. But we ain't them. We are doing slightly different things with those traditional oral materials. So, you know, hands up, that's where we sit. So it is a kind of semi-improvised performance style. It does deal with traditional tales, with folk tales and fairy tales and myths and legends and sagas and ballads and all that good stuff. But it also doesn't apologise for transforming those materials, for changing them, for keeping them in a kind of living performance idiom. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So that's that. Also, I think probably useful context for the project I'm going to talk about. A couple of years ago, I was fortunate enough to get a little bit of money from the British Academy. No, I don't know how I did that either. Specifically to work with storytelling artists in England, particularly looking at ways forward in the light of contemporary understandings of post-coloniality, anti-coloniality, decoloniality. For those of you who don't know, storytelling as a professional performance form in England really started to cohere in the 1980s, when every borough in London wanted to pay a white English storyteller to tell multicultural tales. That was the thing. That's what best practice looked like at that moment. And that is where a lot of now canonical story repertoires were formed. So what this project is about, nearly 50 years on, is about kind of reassessing some of those ways that we have customarily built our repertoires. And particularly my take on that is there is lots of really lovely traditional story material in these islands, in the landscapes, the places that we know really well, but storytellers often overlook them because other things seem more glamorous or more exotic or more marketable. So I'm a one-woman campaign for paying a little bit more attention to some of the narrative materials that we've got knocking around and don't pay very much attention to, including, really importantly for me at least, kind of some of the narrative materials that we find in traditional ballads and songs. I think there's a great untapped resource there, or not very tapped resource there for storytellers. And connected to that, I was pondering over lunch whether it should be from or of. I'm still not sure, I go backwards and forwards. This is kind of my personal project, because when a woman hits 40, she needs a project, and this is my project. Also, when a woman hits 40, she casts herself as Henry V, but that's a whole other thing. Actually, it's a connected thing. But kind of my personal ongoing project is about making shows and performances and touring work that really showcases some of that local material. I often like to think of it as vernacular, some of the vernacular narrative material that we have knocking about in England and neighbouring nations, because there is a ton of lovely stuff. So stories of Mythic England kicked off with a kind of, well, the show's called Henry V, the King's Knickers, which is a meditation on kind of masculinity, national memory, and hiding scars, and maybe why we should sometimes share our scars and the stories of that damage a little bit more openly. And then this is an image from a show called Queens of Albion, which uses the legend of Albina. Are you familiar with this? It's a gorgeous piece of kind of Anglo-Norman fabrication. It's a story that was absolutely knocked up in the 14th century to backfill a pre-existing piece of mythology. But basically it tells us that the first people to inhabit Albion were 30 murderous sisters who arrived in a small boat from Syria. Amazing, happy days. I very gladly spent a couple of years of my life on that project. See, they're just stories we should know. Whether we like them or not, they're worth knowing. Particularly in the context of a right-wing narrative that is like, we don't have any stories, we're not allowed to have anything. We are. We just got to look in the books, because they're there. So that is what Stories from Mythic England is about. It's about trying to bring to light some of the stories, as I say, that are knocking around, but also to explore the fact that they are a little bit more inclusive and progressive than we might think once we start to dig a bit and think a bit. So that's me, really. Occasionally I go to work. Occasionally. Mostly it's this. But I'm going to talk to you today about a project called Northering, which is sort of my new storytelling project. And by new, I mean I've tried it out a little bit, broken it, taken it back to the garage, taken all the wheels off. So it's very much a work in progress. It's something that I am developing kind of through this year and probably beyond. But in order to think about that, I'm aware I've quoted me. I've mostly quoted me because this has all the good bits of Tom Maguire. And if I quote him, it's across several pages. So This is me quoting Tom Maguire, thinking about some of the ways that place operates in contemporary storytelling performance. So as Maguire has observed, the spectator of a storytelling performance always experiences at least two different places, as their attention moves between the fictive space of the story being told and the material surroundings in which the story is being performed. So, for those of you who don't hang out at storytelling gigs, why not? What are you thinking of? Get it sorted. But storytelling doesn't have a particularly strong visual field. There is nothing to look at except the storyteller who is talking to you. If you are seeing beautiful pictures during a storytelling performance, it's because you've imagined them. And that's when it gets really, really beautiful, because I stand here and I imagine stuff in my head, and I try my hardest to be kind of clever and crafty and artful with words in a way that will provoke you to imagine, and then if all is going well, you start to imagine. So we're all imagining like crazy. But it comes from a very, very personal place. The landscapes that we might see during a storytelling performance come actually from our own memories a lot of the time. I give you a prompt. I say a castle or a hill or a field, and you're probably going to pull something out of your own memory bank. So it's a beautifully kind of collaborative way of working with place and landscape in performance, because I can imagine whatever I want, but I can't control what it is you picture on the basis of that same prompt. So we're all imagining, but in really interesting and complicated ways. And we're also moving between being aware of this space, where we're all together in the one room, and also collectively being aware of the kind of landscapes that the protagonists of the stories are moving through. So there's a there, and there's a here, and we move between those in some quite unpredictable and idiosyncratic ways. Does that make sense? You know about folk music, so you know about this. There's the us together, but there's also where the narrative contained in the performance is taking us. So on this basis, Maguire proposes, where are we, as an important conceptual question for the analysis of contemporary storytelling. Which brings me here, oh look, it's me looking windswept. So Northering is, it's a bit of an accidental project. I was asked to pull some stories together this spring for a performance at the Portico Library in Manchester, so shout out to the Portico, thank you very much. And I'm doing a little bit more work with them across this year. And I didn't really have anything, I didn't necessarily want to do one of the full-blown shows, that wasn't the right thing. And I thought, I really want to go back to some of the kind of northern repertoire that I was telling 15 years ago when I was starting out as a storyteller. So Northering began as a way for me to think about some of those stories that I haven't told in a long time and would really like to go back to. A lot of them being stories that come from ballads and come from songs. Do I need to tell you anything? I guess I also, after kind of 5-6 years of stories from Mythic England, I also am starting to feel ready to want to excavate some of my own personal history. Because I'm aware I sound like the most English person in the world, in many ways I am. But my parents gifted me a complicated upbringing, where we spent Monday to Friday in the northeast of England, so kind of full-on pit village Methodist culture, Black's Hands. But then Friday night we'd pack up the car and drive to Argyll, where we were simultaneously running a caravan site. Because that makes perfect sense. And where we did kind of weekends, holidays, and any time that could be spared. So I had this I didn't know I was English until I was about 13. It was a great disappointment to me. And I'm still working on that, I'm just working it through. So in part, Northering is a way for me to think about those different norths, those multiple norths that I feel like I might belong to. And I'm of course very aware that for those of you who are geographically situated even further north, my norths probably look pretty southerly. And that's part of what I was curious to explore as well. So yeah, in many ways an indulgent project, but a way back to some stories that I haven't told in a long time. And yeah, this notion of a mythic north that is weirder than we think, that was really drawing me. So yeah, work in progress, but the current iteration is kind of built around 2 ballad stories. We've got the Laidley Worm of Spindleston Hoof, or Yoof if you're a bit further south, which I have never heard sung. Any of you heard it sung it? You've heard it? Amazing. Is it good?
It is good, yes. I prefer the Lady Worm and the Mackerel of the Sea, but of the 2 ballads, but that's my own preference. But it is good.
Fantastic. See, I'm learning things. So yeah, we've got a Laidley Worm narrative, which is probably not at all by Duncan Fraser, the Cheviot Bard, probably written by a vicar in the 18th century, but you know, we won't go too far into the footnotes. And then King Henry, which is a gorgeous ballad that I know as collected by the entirely unreliable Walter Scott in the Minstrelsy of the Scottish Border. He's a great source for storytellers because he's so unreliable you can basically just go to town, which is great. But I'm pretty sure he attributes the manuscript he was working with to Anna Gordon, about whom we have also heard earlier in the day. So he says the version he's printing is a combination of a text from Anna Gordon and some other recitation that he's not going to tell us about, which in my understanding is code for Walter Scott is making things up again. But again, a fabulous story. Again, is this sung very much?
A bit.
I mean, I've heard Emily Portman sing a version of it, and I believe back in the mists of time, Steel I Span was strong with it. We should sing this more. This is an excellent ballad about a terrifying woman who turns up in the middle of the night in a storm, eats all the meat, drinks all the wine, and then follows this up by eating the king's hawk, greyhound and horse before demanding that he comes to bed with her. This is a great story. Brilliantly in the Walter Scott text there is then a line, and I don't know what that line means. Oh, and then it was next morning and she was magically beautiful. Oh really? Oh really, Walter Scott? So there's also some kind of interesting absence in that narrative as well. So what we got are kind of 2 narratives about monstrous women, about kind of love, perhaps, leading to transformation, but I find these very distinctively kind of northern in this. These are not nice, pretty, frilly love stories. These are pretty full-on and full-blooded and will give you nightmares kind of stories. And I'm all for that. And what I'm playing with is kind of how do I bring those together in some kind of coherent or semi-coherent performance. And something I'm working on right now is using the Snow It Melts the Soonest, which I imagine most of you do know. Really, really beautiful song that I know from the singing of Anne Briggs and Eliza Carthy and the Unthanks as well, although I'm sure it's been sung by many people. And I'm just going to unpack a little bit some of the things that I think are happening as I'm starting to use this song, bits of this song, to kind of interweave and intercut with those other ballad narratives. How am I doing for time? How long do you think I've got?
3-4 minutes.
Oh,
Is that right?
right. Yeah, fine. So, thing 1. You possibly know this story was collected in Newcastle. Collected. No, it wasn't. Absolutely fake news. But it's a story that, insofar as it's associated with any place, is associated. It's a song. It's a song that is associated with Newcastle, which takes me right back to my northeastern roots, which feels like it's a home song to me. So that's part of it. Talking about this song, kind of citing this song, singing this song a little bit, it lets me talk about the northeast as home, which is a really useful thing for me to be able to do. But also because, again and again, such a northern song, we have this kind of notion of the wind beginning to sing, that kind of things start to happen in this song, minds start to change, relationships start to shift when the wind begins to sing. That to me speaks to the kind of 2 ballad stories, which are both full of terrible weather. Things start to change and transform in the context of terrible weather. So one of the things that I think this song lets me explore as a storyteller is building a kind of imaginary landscape where all of these different things can happen. It's not a real place, but it's a place where magical things happen, where change happens, where transformation becomes possible in the context of truly terrible northern weather. And that, to me, is really interesting as well. Third thing this can do for me in storytelling performance, if we come back to the idea of us all in a room together, I cannot tell you the fear that arises on audiences' faces when it becomes apparent that a storyteller might be about to sing. Because some storytellers can sing. People like Hugh Lupton, absolutely, beautiful performers. And then there's me. And that is a very different beast. So while working with a kind of lyric like this can take us away to imaginary places, it can also really sharply bring us back to that shared here and now through the sheer jeopardy of the possibility of live song. And so it's really interesting some of the different levels of place, and both real and imagined, that we can start to get into through introducing song in storytelling performance. And very briefly, to wrap up, it's becoming clear to me that actually this project is not at all about the kind of autobiographical landscapes of the North that I started out thinking it was going to be about. It's really not sitting in those places at all, the more I work with it. The more I work with it, the more I realise that what I'm kind of reaching for in this piece is a north, a set of norths that are imaginary spaces, that are spaces of possibility, that are spaces where things can happen. And usefully, for me, we have this, are you familiar with the kind of collection of the Snow It Melts the Soonest, the narrative of where that comes from, at least in principle? So we have this 1821 text in Blackwood's magazine, the letter from Mr. I'm going to say Shufflebottom, I'm going to assume that's the implied pronunciation, in which Thomas Doubleday, who is a very rich man, a kind of a radical politician, purports to be Mr. Shufflebottom, the song collector, and he spins us this whole yarn about how he hears this song being sung in the street in Newcastle, and it's wonderful, and it's remarkable, and he just happens to write it all down, and then sends it to Blackwood's. Best thinking is, he's making this up, that actually these are his lyrics, and he kind of tells us that the tune is My Love Is Newly Listed, so that's an existing tune to which he is setting new words. And I think this is useful. To me, what this narrative does is essentially give me permission. It says this is a song about imagining place. This is a song that is really strongly connected, not to real Newcastle, but to Newcastle as we might imagine it, or dream it, or as we kind of wish it might be. So to me, this narrative is a really interesting invitation to think about traditional song and place in traditional song as imaginative, as wishful, as full of potential, as a place where we go to express what we wish was true, as well as what might actually be true. And one very final thought. And to be honest, I think Susanna Clarke is probably quite happy with the fact that you can't see her picture there. Yeah. Possibly Susanna Clarke has magicked away the images. Now I see what it is that is missing. So if you know Susanna Clarke, you will know her wonderful novel, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. You might know Piranesi. This is one of her most recent kind of short books, The Wood at Midwinter. And there's a wonderful note at the end where she talks about how she's, well, I'm fairly sure that Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell contained at one time a long footnote, so her footnotes are vanishing, my pictures are vanishing, with a careful explanation of Meredith's city, the city that is near the wood, the city where she lives. Meredith's city is the king's capital of Newcastle, but not that Newcastle, the other one. And that, I feel, is Susanna Clarke's blessing on my kind of dawning realisation that one of the places that opens up for me as a storyteller by working with these songs, these lyrics, is actually not this north, but the other one. Thank you all so much.
Thanks very much, Steffe. that's fabulous. Miriam was coming here, telling stories sometimes. Wonderful. We've time for a couple of quick questions, if anybody's got anything you want to ask.
Not a question, but I seem to remember Steel Eyes Span recorded King Henry.
Yes, I think they did. And also, I don't know quite what the connection was, but I think they recorded an expanded version that kind of invents some later verses, which I also take as giving me permission to invent a little bit around the ending of that story. But yes, thank you.
Not really a comment so much or a question, but it's just a small footnote that I can't find the article, unfortunately. I can't remember which article it is. But Alan Bruford of the Scottish Studies, he wrote an article in which he talks about the way, I think it's a storyteller's memory, but it could be singing memory, I can't remember, about performer memory. And the mental imagery is a series of tableaux, and that helps them remember how the story is put together. I think it might be in storytelling more than song, but you can see how the mental imagery, maybe if it's recurrent in your mind, it helps you. It's a technique of memorialisation that you can then, remember the order of the verses.
That's wonderful. What's the storyteller, Sally Pond Clayton, kind of has written in similar ways about storyteller memory, and particularly the realisation that after she'd been telling a story for many, many years, she kind of stopped and looked at what she was doing. Oh, that's my grandfather's house. And she hadn't realised that she was setting it there until she stopped and looked. So I will have to look that up. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying to find whether the reference is for you.
Taffy Thomas, storyteller, once went, he used to teach courses for teachers on storytelling, and I dipped into one, I think it was to write an article about it, and he made us learn a story from him, and then we had to tell it to our neighbour. It terrified me. How can I remember? And he said, well, it doesn't matter how you remember, and you need to think visually.
Yeah.
You actually picture what's happening and then tell it, which I thought was really interesting. That visual memory rather than actual words.
A lot of storytellers talk about the cinema of the imagination. That's what we're seeing. But with that, you also need, quite interestingly, a sense of rhythm, a sense of the rhythm of the story and where the breaks come and where the turns come, which for me feels very like particularly some ballad structures. So for me, there's a real resonance there too.
Yeah.
I think we'll have to move on there now, if that's okay, because I think we don't want to pinch the other singers as other performers' time. So.
Could I
thank you very much.
just a very quick thing?
Yeah.
That I had lunch with Taffy on Thursday, and I don't know if you know, Dan Neely died just a few weeks ago. He's slowly recovering. On Wednesday, he did his first gig again.
Brilliant.
Just half an hour locally. But he said, he knew I was coming, he sends his love to anyone who knows him.
Well, will you carry love back to him, please?
Anyway, thanks very much, Stephe. So I'd now like to introduce Vanilla Maxwell, who's a singer and researcher and educator, it says in your blurb, which sounds good to me from what we're talking about at lunchtime. He's going to give us songs of County Leitrim. Thank you.
Hello everybody, delighted to be here across the miles for this person, but it's a great opportunity. I have been lurking, I suppose, online at the meetings on and off, and it's funny, I've never been to Sheffield, but I don't know how many of you have been to Leitrim, so but actually, in an ironic kind of twist, Sheffield is one of the townlands that lies not far from Knockbran. So it's actually some place. My granduncle lived there. My grandaunt and granduncle lived there in Sheffield. So it's not as uncommon as you might think. But what I'm speaking about today, I suppose, is my passion. Yes, I am a traditional singer and a researcher and an educator, and I kind of say I'm a passer-oner of songs, because for me, I don't like to think of all the research being done to just go, that's it, on the shelf, good luck. We try and think of ways to bring it back in and try and keep it going and get the next generation interested in it and find some kind of links between what people are interested in and our traditional songs. It's not always easy, but we do our best. And the song the shores of Loch Bran, I'm sure you're familiar with it, there's a couple of different versions of it, but really this is where my love of traditional song first started, because it's the first traditional song that I ever learned. So I was an eager kind of innocent 7-year-old when he started into traditional singing. So the first verse, and you can see here a beautiful picture of Loch Bran and its frosty surroundings. So first verse like this: sit ye down, loyal comrades, sit ye down for a while, till I spend my last hours around Erin's green isle. Come fill up your glasses, and we will drink hand to hand. For tomorrow I'll be leaving the shores of Loch Bran. So as you probably know from Scots Gaelic and from Irish, that loch is the word for a lake. And as I said, my first foray into traditional song came from this song itself. And I suppose it was only for the next 15 years, I'd say, I didn't meet another Leitrim traditional song. So a song from my own county. I was trying to gather songs as part of a portfolio, as part of song competition and all the rest, the reasons why you sing as a child maybe. And with that, my parents would ferry me to various teachers of song. The likes of Fermanagh Rosie Stewart was a huge influence on me. Other greats like Paddy Tunney, Sean Garvey, Paddy Berry, Seamus McMahuna, and then closer to home we had Donegal's Pauline Sweeney, who luckily for Roscommon song, she married Kilruski's Patsy Hanley, so she moved closer to where I was. And two Sligo greats, they were Colm O'Donnell and Carmel Gunning. But I suppose I started to question in my teens why I was singing about places like Lissacasey and Mullabown and numerous songs about the Erne, and why I hadn't learned anything about Carrick and Shannon or Mohill, or even the north of the county like Glenfarne or Ballinaglara. And it was only when I was finished really with college and in my 20s, and probably had ever since that, and had a little bit of time, but ever since that I've become a little bit obsessed with these songs and unearthing these songs from my own county and my own background. And it's only a little county, it's the smallest populated county in Ireland. But these songs, they do give a unique insight into the social history of any place, as people have mentioned in other talks today. But songs that I've come across are songs in praise of Drumhair, Ballinaglara, Drumshanbo, Jamestown, songs about beautiful maidens from places like Milltown and Castlefore and Ballinamore. In fact, there's even one about Mary of Loch Bran, which I've never heard anybody sing. And there are songs about various modes of transport, including John McGrail's Break in Drumkieran, many about the narrow gauge system, long since gone, songs of the O'Rourke's, the O'Dagnans, and ones that portray peasant on-the-ground reaction to the murder of the infamous Lord Leitrim. And of course, the theme that occurred most throughout was that of emigration. So, which brings back really to this and the best known traditional song from the county, which is The Shores of Loch Bran. And in looking at our county, as you can see, we're an oddly shaped county. We're quite long, and it's got a little belt across the middle. In fact, you can't travel from South Leitrim to North Leitrim without either going into Sligo or into Roscommon. So you can't actually go from so because Loch Allen divides it like a belt here. So even people from Leitrim find that fascinating when you tell them to go, and they try and think of a way. But unless you've got a boat, you have to go by road and into Roscommon or into Cavan. Even you can go through there as well. So we are this kind of oddly shaped county, and Loch Allen itself has inspired many songs. But again, that's for another day. Our affinity, I suppose, for emigration songs, it stems, of course, from the fact that we have this steady decline in population beginning during famine times. And we were one of the worst affected counties. The population fell to its lowest, really, in 1996. But official records, they show that in 1841, before the famine, Leitrim's population was 155,297. And then 10 years later, that had fallen and we lost 43,400 people over that steady 10-year period. Death, starvation, emigration being a huge one. And by 1871, a further 16,355 were gone. So with the result that by 1996, you're looking at 25,000 in population, which is a huge amount when you go back and you see that it's a loss of 130,000 people really since 1841. Now we have managed to increase those figures in recent times, and the population, it stands at about 36,000 I'd say today, and you know, in terms of, I suppose it has to have had some kind of bearing on the folk songs and the stories and everything else that we'd be telling about our county. Listening to tales from older generations about rows of houses and pre-famine villages that existed, and I've witnessed myself the ruins of little places that stone gables have been left where the mud walls have fallen, and kind of throughout the fields of my childhood really, you'd see where there were little patches of houses that were around of the people who had lived there before. So it's no wonder that a song like The Shores of Lochbran then would resonate with so many, and it continues to do so today. The fact is that there are much more people of Leitrim descent living outside of Leitrim than there are living in Leitrim. And of course, that's not unique to our little county, but that's what I'm looking at today, it's our little county. So Lochbran itself, as you can see here, again, this lovely picture taken by Mark Kelly. So you can see that it's only a small little loch. Even just beside it, you've got another little lake. We have, I'd say, over 120 lakes in Leitrim. If you Google it, I think it says 42. But when I go through the local records, there's definitely more than 120. The fact is, nobody has officially counted them, because sometimes you have ones that disappear and reappear during the wet seasons. We've others that they call mysterious. There's a lake that's called Lochon, not far from me, they say mysterious. It used to be a great fishing lake, but now it's only a swamp. Drainage, farming practices, everything else has changed all of that. But we reckon about 120. And Lochbran itself, it's a 60-acre lake. It's located 4 miles northeast of Carrick-on-Shannon, which would be our main county town, and can be accessed off the Ballinamore Road. And they tell us this is very good bream water with a stock of roach, hybrids and tench if you're into your fishing. So that's coming officially from Fishing in Ireland info. But the lake sits off just beside the road here, within the view of the beautiful Shleeve an Éireann, which translates into the Iron Mountains, Shleeve an Éireann. And that from there, it's just such a wonderful view back through the countryside of Roscommon, Leitrim and Cavan when you're standing on top of that. But it's within the view of that, and also there's a very famous myth, or when we say myth, I don't see them always as being myths, but that the two of the Danann, that tribe would have landed and descended in a mist on Shleeve an Éireann, bringing with them poetry and music and song to the Irish people and the people in the area as well. So there's possibly a more famous link musically with the Hill of Sheemore, which you can see over here on the right hand side, and that is, if you've heard of harpist Thurlough Carlin, you'll know his first composition was Shebeg Sheemore, and that was influenced by Shebeg, which is a little hill beside Sheemore, and he was told a story of the fairies fighting on the big hill and the small hill, and who won. I don't know who won, but he composed a tune, and that was it. And actually it was a song. So it is better known as a tune, but it actually has Irish, Gaelic lyrics to it. Most of his tunes actually started out as songs, so most of them have Gaelic lyrics to them. So we do know that in terms of Farnat, just here, the second verse of the song, no more will I wander around Farnat's green hills, nor the place I love fondest by the bounds of the mill, on those green fertile valleys where oft times I ran, to inhale the sweet breezes round the shores of Lochbran. So we can see here where Farnat, and I've got a little T in the brackets there because I've heard this sung as Fermanagh Green Hills, Hartness Green Hills, Farna, Farnat, Farnocht, because that's song for you, isn't it? Particularly place names. But I know that the people around here who live in Farnat, that they will say, this is where it should be. I would have learned it as Farnat, but if you search in the census, the two records that we rely most upon, because we have all the records of them, is 1901 and 1911 in Ireland. And if we search in those censuses, we find that Farna, in the Gowal district, which this is, had a population of 67 people, including families of Flynns and Morans and Mortons and Murphys. But once we go to 1911, there's no mention of Farna, F-A-R-N-A-G-H, but when you now go to Farnat, add a T, you've got now the Flynns and Mortons and Morans and Murphys are living there. So it's the same place, it's just names were wont to change. And a search of the place names database of Ireland, Log Anam, it tells us that Farna or Farnocht in the civil barony of Kiltahard means bare hill, and places the townland at the shores of Lough Bran. In fact, Lough Bran is in the townland of Farnet. Other historical references, such as Reverend John Pinkman, he produced research on local place names in Leitrim, and his research suggests that Farna comes from Farnack, N-A-C-H, meaning a place of alder trees. And there are other alternative spellings like F-E-A or N-I-U-G-H-T, and from 1836, Fernuchta, which translates to a naked man. Then I left it there and said, okay, I'm not going to look at any other meanings. But there are numerous Farnats and Farnots and Fiarnats throughout Ireland, same as with Sheffield as well. But Bran is not as common. So Lough Bran itself is one of the mysterious ones. And if you're familiar with any of the Irish folk tales, you may have heard of Fionn McCool. So Fionn McCool, his adventures throughout the country, throughout the 3rd century, he fought loads of battles. He was a leader of Na Fianna, which was an ancient warrior band in Ireland. And one legend refers to him being buried at the top of Shimore, with his wife Grania, supposedly standing up in a cairn, that the two of them were facing the hill of Tara. Another one has him buried actually in a cairn in Shebeg. Now, again, there was lots of stories, lots of kind of references to him, but not just in Leitrim, throughout Ireland itself. So, in fact, he's probably buried in about 7 or 8 different places, but everyone likes to claim him for their own. So, of course, then there was going to be lots of stories. Every warrior had their dog, and his most faithful dog was Bran. And there are plenty of local stories where Bran would have saved somebody by jumping into the lake. Other stories that he was drowned in the lake and that's why it was called Lough Bran. But we do get also from O'Donovan's mapping of Ireland that Lough Bran refers to the Lake of the Ravens. Now, while I was doing research on the song here, I came across this interesting letter in the Roscommon and Leitrim Gazette. It was in June 1822. And this was a time when there was famine also prowling around the district. And this is a quote from the newspaper. It said, "A letter from Kiltahart says, our situation is really deplorable. Several have already died from hunger despite of all our exertions. Many for several days have been living on watercresses, and bran got from the neighbouring mill is considered a luxury by others. And there are also incidences wherein want has occasioned mental derangement." So bran from the mill, now I'm not going to argue with anybody who's an expert in toponymy or anything like that. I just thought it could just be another possible explanation of the name, go back 1822, who knows. But it is amazing how this song has survived for so long in the tradition. It has travelled so far because I've heard it sung in most of the English-speaking world, or somebody who sings it. And it's one of those that I'd say a good 50% of Leitrim people would either have heard it, know it, or know somebody who sang it. And that's amazing because there's not too many other traditional songs I can tell you in Leitrim that people would have heard it. They just go, where'd you find that old thing from? So this means that it's kind of strange that we don't have a bit of more definitive proof of authorship of the song itself. But there are 2 pieces of evidence, 2 theories, I suppose, that people have come up with, and a number of different evidences to back these up. So this is what I was looking at, whether it was a Hill or a Murphy person who wrote this song, and when the song actually was written. So research by Dermot McNabb, he's a member of Carrick-on-Shannon and District Historical Society. He claims that the song itself was written by a man named Hill, who lived in Clooman. This is a townland in County Roscommon on the Boyle Road just outside Carrick. So he tells us that Mr. Hill later emigrated to the United States and he never returned, and that the song was about a Moran man who lived beside Lough Bran and worked there in a mill, and the remains were still to be seen beside the lake shore in the 1930s. And this information is also backed up in the Dukas Schools collection, the informant being Sister Emerentia in Carrick-on-Shannon. But in the Dukas folklore collection, it tells us, yes, it was composed by a Mr. Hill, but it was about a man called Brock, who lived beside Lough Bran and worked in the mill. So the remaining of the dwelling house was still there, and the mill was still there, the remains of the mills too. And it's interesting to note that, yes, there were hills in Clooman in 1901, 1911 census, but there was no Brocks. Now perhaps Brock was a nickname, so it could have been a nickname for the Moran man, because Moran was quite popular in Ireland. If you have a popular name, you've got a nickname to go with it to distinguish which one you actually are. But we have no proof of that or no mention other than that. So we are told also that there's a song, so also in the Dukas, this song appears called the Leitrim Road, and it's said to have been written by Hill. But when they say that, they say composed by Mr. Hill of Lough Bran, County Leitrim, who is in America. rather than Mr. Hill of Cloonman. So that's how the Dukas Folklore collection, which if you're not familiar with it, it's a collection that the government would have decided in the 1930s in Ireland, we need to start claiming some of this tales and folklore and pastimes of people that were losing very quickly, and they got the school children who were 12 years old generally to go out and ask their older neighbours, grandparents about what they remembered in their childhood, and they wrote it down. So yes, while it's a great resource, it's not always reliable because obviously it's very subjective, particularly some of the stuff you read and then the next page nearly negates what you're after reading there. But this is what we're going on here to back up this theory as well. Well, one local man, Pádraig Gilbride, he's an interesting character in his 80s. He's a local historian, but he likes to kind of stir things. He won't stay quiet if he sees an injustice being done. And he would claim that The Shores of Lough Bran was written by a Murphy man, and that he was one of 13 Murphy children to have been born in Farna, who all emigrated to America. And like when he says that, I have to sit up and take notice. He's in his 80s. He says he remembers his mother, who died about 20 years ago, and she was in her 90s when she passed away. When she was a child, she'd go to Murphy's house and she would listen as the Yankees, as they called them at the time, would return. They'd listen to what was going on, and they would always sing this song. And when they were finished, one of the Murphys, John Murphy, who was living there, would say, weren't we lucky that we could come back and visit the old homestead? The man who wrote this, Barney Murphy, he never got to return. So therefore, what Pádraig is telling us is that he would place this song as being maybe 200 years old. And if we were to look at 1822 and the mill records and all the rest of it being there, then that is a possibility that, of course, he could have written with it. As happened with these older songs, sometimes you had somebody sang it later on and then people attributed it to them. Or they wrote other songs and maybe claimed it as their own. Who knows? But it's just that sense of, do we know? The amount of times that the song has appeared in the local newspaper and there's never been mention of who wrote the song is interesting in itself, and never really been questioned either till I came along and started stirring things up. But whatever it is, it's obviously that Fermanagh, anyhow, Fermanagh's Green Hills are definitely not belonging in this song. If you're not familiar with Leitrim, lots of water. On this here, you've got Leitrim Village, you've got Carrick and Shannon, and you've got Drumshanbo, and you've got the lovely walkway, the floating boardwalk that's here in Drumshanbo. And these are all place names that are definitely mentioned within this song. So we do know that it's definitely set here. He says, on the oncoming morning I will bid you adieu from Leitrim, Drumshanbo, and sweet Carrick too. And no matter what fortunes I meet on my way, my thoughts will be with you by night and by day. So very kind of familiar lyrics. When we look at a lot of our immigration songs, we've got a lot of them that are very, similar and very much going to be missing the place that they came from. So that sense of place, that sense of home. And these lines also echo kind of memories of the American wake, or the sprees, as Leitrim people would call them. So the sprees people had before people left for America. Here, this is an American wake that we recreated at one stage, and on it, the griddle here, you can see there's some bannock bread that's been made. And bannock bread, it kind of probably came from a Scottish tradition. It sounds very much like it could have. Lots of counties would say never heard of it, never used this. It was oaten bread, a flat bread that was sent with a lot of the immigrants as they left, because what they would say is, obviously, if you were travelling on this boat for 6 weeks and it was quite rocky, stomachs weren't going to be great, and you still needed to have sustenance. If you got there and you weren't feeling so well, you hadn't eaten anything, chances are you didn't get to enter the country, or perhaps you didn't survive the journey at all. So this was one of the things they often sent with some of the immigrants who were leaving, was this bannock bread. They could chew, it was very chewy, they could chew on a bit of it, it would keep them going. There was a bit of sugar in there as well, give them a bit of energy, and it would get them through the journey. So it was one of the traditions that they had in Leitrim. And here just you can see the narrow gauge that I spoke about earlier with the train leaving Drumshanbo. If you were emigrating from Lough Bran, chances are you got a donkey and cart, maybe to bring you to the nearest train station, which would be Carrick and Shannon or Drumshanbo, or you walked and people would come with you. So the neighbours would come with you. The mother and father would normally not go with you. They would normally hug you as you left and then tell you that it's bad luck to turn back. They didn't want their children to see them crying. They didn't want them to see the emotion. So they let them go as such. And there was also songs, there was also music. people would have, even in their states of poverty, brought lots of stuff for the American Wake, for the spree. And one of the things that left them with sustaining memories was of song, of dance. And the songs were called, in Ireland anyhow, they were called Camalias. But in certain parts of Leitrim, there was often songs that were called Courants. And maybe coming from the French courant, I'm not sure, but Courants with a K, they would have spelled it. And they would have been sort of dim owl songs again, is what they'd call them, those nonsense songs. And perhaps Lochbran was thought of in the same way at a certain stage. But we do know that it was very popular in that it was recorded by so many people. As you probably have heard of, say, Delia Murphy, Dermot Hegarty. You've got the first recording made in the 40s by Richard Hayward, who's pictured here. He was a film star and a writer. He did a lot of writing on his travels as well throughout Leitrim. So he was very well known and very well much would have brought the song into a bigger realm, if you like. Dolores Kane did a version, Cara Dillon in more recent times, and that Dara Yates. And the Boys of the Loch, of course, Cathal McConnell would have been a big collector of songs. So like it's been recorded so many times. Not always brilliant recordings, some of them are a bit boom, chum, which, you know, enough said. But for me, the people who I would consider the real singers of this song and the people who really kept it alive for so long are local people. Like here you've got Josephine McNamara, wonderful lady, emigrated back. She's gone to Connecticut, I'd say, for about 60 years. She's still living there. She comes back every summer. But she's been singing this song there in Yonkers and the Kerry Hall and all around the place, always Leitrim songs, and she keeps it alive. Bernie Whitney, his daughter Anne, they live in Port, which again is on the shores of Lochbran. He would have sang this song locally for many, many years. We've got Michael O'Rourke over here, affectionately known as the singing postman, because he sang as he worked, and he would have sang the song as well as numerous other traditional local ballads. And just here, my own link, these are my two grandnaunts, so I've got Lizzie Nora and Agnes Hartigan, and they would have sang this song, as well as their aunt before them. So it was one of those that it was always floating around, and they would not have considered themselves singers. They were just singing these songs because that's what they said, that's what they did as such. My question, I suppose, is because there are so many others, so just to say Lochbran is not the only song that we have. Bold Rossinver Braes. Rossinver Braes is in the north of the country. Similar sentiment, adieu my native country boys, must I leave you here behind, and go and seek my fortune in a far and foreign clime, to leave the land that gave me birth, that grieves my heart full sore. Adieu my old-aged parents, will I ever see you more? So similar sentiments, and was sung around the area, but never recorded by anybody. Farewell Bornacoola, which is in the Midlands, so as I said, a very long county, and it's just on the Longford border. Farewell Bornacoola, I'm lonely to leave you, my thoughts will be with you wherever I go. For as there I was born, 'tis there I would tarry, in the fields where so sweetly the Rin waters flow. So again, similar sentiments in it, but never recorded by anybody. Or an exile's lament for Drumahair. O Ireland, my Ireland, how oft I dream of thee, a little cot so neat and grand, my home in Breffni. My eyes have seen Columbia, a land both free and fair, yet none of which could equal thee, my own loved Drumahair. So all places, all proud of where they've come from, going to miss where they've come from, and there's numerous other ones. I think maybe at this stage, not all emigration songs, but I might have maybe about 800 Leitrim songs that are there. So there's definitely loads and loads that if you didn't go digging, someone would tell you, nah, none, there's none. Lovely Leitrim, that's it. Don't look for any more. One of the most beautiful singers of Shores of Lochbran, I'm going to give her a listen, hopefully it's going to play for us. This is May Reynolds Malone. She was never officially recorded apart from 2 songs by the BBC when Seamus Ennis was doing kind of trips and was recording Tom Moore and the likes. But we don't have access to those recordings. We have one of her singing The Shores of Lochbran, which comes from the Cultus archives. So we're going to listen to a little bit of her singing The Shores of Lochbran. And it should come up here, should it? Yeah, I can see it just there, I think. Sometimes a bit slow. That's all right.
Is it just above the lake in the picture?
No, that's from the PowerPoint. This is the. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
It sounds like it's trying. I do have the sound file separately, so you could hear it in just a like, oh, I'm really sorry it worked perfectly when I did it originally.
And it's not up on this one now. It's not on that.
Apologies, I don't know.
That's all right.
I'll try it, but I don't know.
Yeah, we've got a picture.
Maybe
Sorry.
at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't worry. Yeah, it's fine. Absolutely. Just to say before I go that a couple of things, because as I said, it's not just, and I feel like I went through that, but it's not just for me, just about, there you go, the research and the whole lot of it. We have been doing numerous things to try and bring back the song. One of them is a Leitrim Larks project. All of this is online as well, and that you can follow. We have a monthly session. It's called the Lend an Ear session, because I'm very much about it being whatever you want to bring to the session, because not everybody wants to sing a traditional song. Not everybody's comfortable with singing without music, and with us obviously traditional song was without music, so we say whatever you want. So it could be a poem, it could be a story, and I try and introduce a traditional song from the area so that they are singing something. We also have song tours that we've done as part of Heritage Week. This is Maeve, who was one of our guests for the Lend an Ear session. Little Larks, so for the smaller ones, to give them a little platform, so they come for an hour and they have a singing session. And you get anything from the Shores of Lochbrand to Old MacDonald. But it doesn't matter, because what they're doing is they're all listening to each other, and then you get them onto another song and away they go. I'm part of Heritage in Schools as well, which is ran by Heritage Ireland. So what they do is they part fund our visits to the schools, and I bring traditional songs. If you're a school in Ballinamore, I'm going to bring you a song from Ballinamore, and the kids will be going, what? That's where I live. And you're going, yeah, and they love singing about the places that they come from, because they don't normally hear those songs at all. Projects, the Ukrainian community, we have a lovely Ukrainian community in Carrick-on-Shannon, and they have been sharing their traditional songs with us, and they come to our sessions as well. And the Rakes of Music collection, loads and loads of stuff from Leitrim. John Jack O'Reilly, you might be familiar with from Christy Moore's work, but actually Boyle claims John Jack O'Reilly. He was born in Carrick-on-Shannon, did most of his singing around County Leitrim, which his relations will tell you all about. Maureen McNavola, ballad singer, local singer. Tom Moran, who I mentioned just there, who had all the child ballads, that he was Leitrim, he was just outside Mohill. Tom Creamer, aforementioned Ballinamore. Like little known singers at all, but they're all here in this collection, Rakes of Music. Francis J. Cox actually came from, he was born in Cornwall, but he lived not far from where I live now, and he wrote loads of local ballads as well as singing them. And Phil McGowan was another writer of local ballads, and there's loads more. That's just a few that I put up there, but you can check them out. They're all online, and it's just to show you that there is song, there is music, there are plenty of material that's there. And there's a couple of sources, and my website, fanulamaxwell.com, that you can check out.
Nobody could say that didn't hit the brief if that didn't have a sense of place. That was astonishing. I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much. I'm really sorry, I don't think we've got time for any questions, because Cara is waiting, I think, ready to start that talk.
Yep.
Running a bit over already.
So Cara's is pre-recorded, and then she's going to be here for the questions.
Oh, okay, I didn't realise that. So she's actually pre-recorded. So,
yeah,
right.
So
just
to
no
warn
introduction
you,
from me.
Apologies again, Fanula, for not getting the song.
Yeah.
It worked, but it's not working now. But if there's any time, say in the tea break, we can put her on this. It's a lovely, lovely rendition. So, Cara. I'm right, so it's Cara next.
Cara, yes. So Cara's doing Place and Women in Irish Song.
So Cara's listening, and she's online, and hopefully will be with us for questions afterwards. Sorry, just to let you know. Am I still sharing? Hang on a second. Sorry, folks. So this plays. I'll just reload that again, if that's all right. Sorry. This is working. Let's try again.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm so sorry I can't be there with you in person. I'm very excited today to be talking about songs of home, women, and place in Irish song. A couple of months ago, I gave a paper.
Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm so sorry I can't be there with you in person. I'm very excited today to be talking about songs of home, women, and place in Irish song. A couple of months ago, I gave a paper to the TSF's fortnightly group that attempted to lay out categories for types of place songs in Ireland. I ended up galloping through as many as I could in record time and was unable to do justice to any of them. When this conference came along, I thought it was an excellent chance to remedy this and explore one of these song types in more detail. Inevitably, as soon as I began to work on this paper, I realized, however, that I had once again waded into a topic that was much deeper than it looked from the shore, and I frantically began looking for shallower bits from which to start. What follows, therefore, is only the beginning of what I am sure will be a long and fruitful research topic. Today, I will begin with a short description of the types of song that connect women and place, and an exploration of two songs in particular that might shed light on this connection. One of the difficulties in exploring this topic is that it's very broad and somewhat vague. My interest in it started when I noticed that the hares in Irish hare hunting songs are always female and are often identified with a particular place, as attested to by titles like the Pregan White Hare and the Brown Hare of Whitebrook. We need not look far, however, to see further examples of the association of females and places in many types of Irish traditional songs. For example, women are featured heavily in political and patriotic songs of Ireland, where they often serve as a metaphor for Ireland itself, as demonstrated in this painting of Erin, a representation of Ireland, writing the epitaph for Irish revolutionary hero Robert Emmet. Women often appear in exile songs, such as Spancel Hill, as representations of both a place and a time that have been lost, or as part of what the exile is longing to return to. But perhaps most often, women take pride of place in praise songs which extol the virtues of a particular lady and of a particular place together. These songs tend to take two forms. Either they feature a woman representing a particular area from which she originated, such as in The Star of the County Down or The Flower of Maharelli and countless others, or occasionally they use a love interest as a plot device in order to traverse a particular area in song. Each one of these topics deserves a paper of its own, and doubtless there are others that I have not listed here, but today I will focus on this latter type and explore two songs where women become a reason for wandering through and admiring a landscape. Before turning to our two main songs, however, it is worth taking a moment to consider how common the connection of a woman and a place really is in Irish song. This is a partial list of songs published in Sam Henry's collection, Songs of the People, whose titles include a woman, either by name or by epithet, and a place name. And I say a partial list because I'm sure there are some that I missed. Sam Henry originally published Songs of the People in a weekly column in the Cooleraine newspaper, The Northern Constitution, from 1923 to 1939. Although this collection represents mainly the repertoire of the north of Ireland, it does include songs from further afield, and similar songs can, of course, be found not just throughout Ireland, but through the British Islands and also America. But the list from just this one collection suggests how common this topic of song is. It should be noted that not all of these songs are praise songs or love songs. Blooming Caroline of Edinburgh Town, for example, is a love story gone very wrong. However, the vast majority of them involve a male narrator praising the virtues of a young lady who is, in the song, very closely associated with a particular place. Some songs directly draw comparisons between the lady and the landscape. Many of them discuss the woman's physical beauty and her character traits in great detail, and often these are represented as either reflecting or adding to the prowess of the place from which she came. It seems to me that the fact that this formula has been so often repeated from so many different places suggests that it has resonated with a wide variety of songmakers, and obviously with the song carriers as well. Today, however, I would like to look at two songs which express this connection in a slightly different fashion. Dark Inishowen and a song called McGilligan, or The Shores of Sweet Benone. These songs, as their titles show, put the emphasis more on the landscape than on the ladies, and the women in them serve as inspiration for exploration of a place rather than a direct representation of that area. Both of these songs come from the northern tip of Ireland. Dark Inishowen comes, unsurprisingly, from the Inishowen Peninsula on County Donegal, which boasts the most northerly point in Ireland. And McGilligan comes from just on the far side of Lough Foyle from County Derry. Benone is a townland of McGilligan, which is marked very roughly by the X in that image there. Both of these songs are almost certainly written by local people. The author of Dark Inishowen is unknown as far as I know, but it is widely considered to have been written locally, and since it is not much known outside the area, this seems very probable. McGilligan was composed by a local constable sometime in the late 1800s. Both songs tell of courtship and feature a relationship between the narrator, his lady, and the landscape they both inhabit. Let's first look at Dark Inishowen. I'm going to be very cheeky here and sing you a few verses myself rather than playing a local singer, only so I can skip verses and just give you an idea of the story. Ye maidens of beauty, and so forlorn, that carelessly wander away from your home. I am off by the moonlight and by break of the morning. I'll be found in the valley of dark I've roved round a place they call Fair Clonmany, in search of a sweetheart that I might adore, but a maiden to love me I couldn't find any. From Indoran Bridge to the Gap of Mano, still 'twas back in the shades of Old Barn and I found you. That valley o'ershadowed by mountains so grand, and I prayed that good angels would ever protect you, as I placed a keepsake on your little white hand. But now I am stationed in County Fermanagh, so far from my loved one and far from my home. But when I return, it will be to my dear one that I left in the mountains of Dark Inishowen. Dark Inishowen is still regularly sung in the area today and exists in at least two different versions. The plot involves an unnamed but presumably male narrator who is searching for a wife. This search gives the narrator an excuse to wander around the peninsula, describing the landscape and naming various places as he goes. Eventually, his search is successful, and the final verse details how the man is now stationed in County Fermanagh, but longing to be back home with his lady. It is interesting that this song essentially becomes a song of exile in this last verse, even if it is only to an adjoining county. The theme of the man leaving and the woman staying behind is very common in Irish songs, and is doubtless a reflection of a world in which men frequently left home for long periods to find work, fight in wars, emigrate permanently, or go into exile for one reason or another. This issue of exile and the prominence of songs in which the narrator is absent from the place and woman that he loves suggests one reason for the connection of women and place. A woman and a place creates a home. A single lad stationed in County Fermanagh might very well stay there, particularly if he finds a young lady in the region, or he might travel further in search of his fortune. A single lad, even if he loves his native place, is rootless in a way that a lad with a girl to go back to is not. Another song from the St. Henry collection, The Maid of Alta Meaden, makes this explicit when the narrator states, "See yonder on the hillside the wild bird knows no fear, yet in the snare he soon may be in danger. 10,000 golden hairs of her who I love dear have captured me, and I'm no more a ranger." Although there are many immigration and exile songs where the man never returns to his home, a man who has left a sweetheart behind him generally seeks ever to return, even if he doesn't manage it, rather than create a new home or future in a new country. There seem to be far fewer songs in which the woman accompanies her husband or lover when he goes abroad. However, when she does, she often goes to stay. In songs like Craigie Hill or The Green Fields of America, the clear intention is to leave Ireland permanently and build a new home in North America, a fact which is symbolized by the woman making the trip as well. However much a place may be missed, a home can be recreated if the woman comes along. If, on the other hand, the woman who is sought after is not interested, the place itself seems to lose much of its charm. Many praise songs end with the narrator either leaving or threatening to leave if he isn't successful in his courtship, as seen in another St. Henry song, The Maid of Croagmore. "If I don't gain this handsome maid, I'll leave my native shore, and bid farewell to all my friends that live round Croagmore." And likewise in The Maid on the Moor Shore, where a rejected suitor laments, "Farewell now to Lord Edmund's groves, likewise the bleaching green, where the linen webs lie clean and white, pure flows the crystal stream, where many's the happy day I spent, but now, alas, they're o'er, since the lass I love has banished me far, far from the moor shore." In songs like The Maid of Coolmore and The Flower of Portate, the lady immigrates apparently on her own, and the young man, after some hearty lamentation, vows to go after her. It should be noted that there are similar themes in songs with a female narrator. In the great Fermanagh song, Edward on Loch Erin's Shore, the unnamed female narrator mourns her lover who has been exiled for 7 years. She wishes that she could go to him to make the time pass quicker before they both return to Loch Erin. Likewise, a County Antrim version of Kelswater, also found in Songs of the People, features a young lady whose lover has gone abroad and promised to return to take her with him. This combination of a woman and a place making up a home is seen with even greater effect in the song known as either McGilligan or The Shores of Sweet Benone. This song appears in St. Henry's Songs of the People and is still a great favorite in the area's day. It was recorded in 1966 by the great Eddie Butcher, a singer from McGilligan himself. We'll hear a verse and a chorus of his song here.
I came friend when just come here tonight to sing to you. I bathe and splendid like wine, my love, sweet and you see. She was born in McGilligan, well, this mountain on the first place that I saw my love was the old Holland strand. Through been every rocks of Lochty
materials tells us that the author of the song was a Constable Finnell of the Royal Irish Constabulary, and was said, quote, to have made the song for a concert towards the end of the century, unquote. Like Dark and Showen, this song uses a lady as an excuse to traverse a landscape in verse. The song recounts various walks that the couple take to scenic parts of the area, always entwining the couple's mutual love for each other and the place. Although it is a courting song in the sense that it begins with their first meeting and the relationship seems to grow throughout the song, it is all in the past tense, and the result of the courtship seems settled from the beginning. The focus of the song, therefore, is on the pairs enjoying each other's company and the grandeur of their surroundings. The woman in this song, Mary by name, is a much more real and present character than the diaphanous lady of Dark and Showen. She is clearly a great walker and a vivacious companion, and seems to be as fond of the region as the narrator is. The final verse shows the pair standing on McGilligan Point, watching an immigration ship leaving the country loaded with young people. Mary and the narrator kneel and pray for the safe passage of the ship and repeat their vow of never leaving the place themselves. Whether the song was written in response merely to the mass immigration happening at the time, or if there was some specific event in the life of the author which raised the specter of immigrating himself, we shall likely never know. The result, however, is a depiction of a man who is well contented where he is, with his heart and his house both in order. McGilligan's shares some characteristics of a roving out song, in that it features a man sallying forth and recounting what he saw along the way. Yet it is slightly unusual in that the lady comes along for the adventure. Many familiar songs feature a young man roving out and meeting a woman along the way, but in this case the woman is introduced in the second line and becomes a companion for the plot rather than the subject of the adventure. This element of companionship within the landscape offers an interesting variation on Roger Renwick's framework of gender-defined spatial domains. Renwick defines the act of going out in the context of traditional songs as one that offers both adventure and peril. He defines out as, quote, a place beyond the boundaries of one's customary context, around where everyday rules do not apply and where one is free to participate in an unusual adventure, end quote. He demonstrates that going out of context is an adventure for male characters, but it often results in danger for female ones. Tolkien and Wilgus later expanded on Renwick's work and showed that the event reverse is also true, and that being in a home or domestic setting is often a space where, quote, women are more likely not to only be safe, but in control, end quote, and that entering them is, quote, disastrous or embarrassing for men, end quote. Although Renwick in particular has been rightly criticized for occasionally veering so far into the theoretical that he loses sight of the songs, I do think this overlap of gender roles and spatial domains is supported by the songs themselves and is therefore worth considering, particularly in the context of women and their association with place. McGilligan offers an intriguing middle path here. The first thing that we are told about Mary is that she was born in McGilligan, making the whole area in some ways her home place. Interestingly, the narrator never reveals whether he himself is from the area or not. I did find a census record suggesting he might have been a Belfast man originally, but I am not sure if this is the right person, so research on that is ongoing. Either way, what is presented is a situation in which Mary is in her home context, even if it is a whole area rather than a specifically domestic one. The narrator, however, can rove out in the same space, and although he does not encounter the sort of high adventure or danger seen in many of the big ballads, he does get the girl, as it were, and both of them coexist happily in the same spatial domain. In conclusion, the connection between women and place is a complicated and nuanced one, which often seems to ask more questions than it answers. Women seem to serve as a sort of anchor, a tangible reflection of what the narrators most value about their local places, and also as a reason to put down roots and call a place home. The fact that so many of these songs seem to involve both leaving the place and the woman suggests that loss of or longing for home is a central aspect of these songs, and perhaps a reason for their creation. This research also throws into high relief one of the central tensions of traditional song scholarship. The connection between place and woman is clearly something that came naturally to songmakers, but in attempting to unpick the reasons or inspirations behind it, we are always in danger of losing the essence of the song and simply reporting our own assumptions and interpretations as some sort of fact. Although I think that the framework of gendered spatial domains might be useful in thinking about these types of songs, I can hear the shouts of, "But the singers don't think about these things," echoing in my ear as I write. This is, of course, entirely true, but such repeated patterns or formulae or traditions, or whatever you like to call them, do exist within these songs, which suggests that the songmakers must be aware of them on some level and make repeated use of them, and that they must resonate with the singers as well, or the songs would not be carried. It is one thing to recognize this, however, but to try to express it in prosaic terms often leads to loss of nuance and chronic overthinking. We must, I think, remain curious about things, but keep a wary eye out for taking ourselves and our theories too seriously. This paper has barely scratched the surface of a large topic which keeps raising more questions and avenues for further research. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your attention, and I look forward to questions, comments, and counter-arguments either here or at my email address there on the screen. Thank you so much, and have a fantastic afternoon.
Okay, can you...
Well done, Julia.
What a fascinating talk that was. Very interesting indeed. Hello, Cara. We've got very few minutes before the break to ask questions. So has anybody got any questions they'd like to put to Cara, please?
I forget how heavy my American accent is, so I have to sit and listen to myself talk for a while.
The singing was beautiful. We really enjoyed it, I think, and also Fanula's presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Have we got no questions at all? Steve?
Steve's gone.
Steve, go on.
Just an observation. I enjoyed the presentation very much. I did think that your point of the woman as the anchor in not all of the songs, clearly there are exceptions, but the large majority of the songs, and from my very limited knowledge, that's reinforced. I think that's a very good point, that the woman is often associated with the place, rightly or wrongly, and that causes the tension, or sometimes the lack of it, in the song itself.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that, because as about halfway through this, I was wondering, like, did I start with this and then, start projecting my own ideas on there? But I do think there is a connection there that needs to be teased out a little bit more. So, yeah, hopefully this will start on it. But I'm glad to hear other people think that as well.
There's a question from Colleen in the chat as well. She asked, was there any reason why you picked two songs from the north of Ireland?
In this case, it was because I know the songs from that area better than I do in other places, and because I was looking, I just started my exploration with the Sam Henry collection, because that seemed like a good spot where I knew a solid collection of songs came from. So I started there, and I was thinking about the Shores of Sweet Minone, and then that made me think of Dark and Ashone, which isn't in the Sam Henry collection, but also has that element of using the love story as an excuse to look at the landscape. So it kind of was an accident that I ended up with both of those far northerly songs, but it seemed like a good place to start, and then we'll look for others from there. But they do exist, of course, not just all over Ireland, but similarly, at least throughout the British Isles as well. So yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. Do you have a sense of who's singing these songs? Are they found mostly in male repertoires or female repertoires, or a mix?
So that's a really interesting question. I don't yet. That's the next thing is to look at, can we find, not only who sings them today, and I have a little bit of a sense just from spending time in sessions that they're very widely sung today. There'll be kind of like 2 or 3 of them that are well known, but if we could find ethnographic or some kind of historic evidence of who was singing them, that would be really fascinating. I haven't seen that yet, but that's kind of the next step in the research. And tying into that, I think, is the question of who was writing them and what were they being used for. Were they, some of the notes in the Sam Henry collection mention who the person they were written for, so you'll have, you know, the rose of and sometimes it will say who the rose was, who the woman was. And so that makes me think maybe they were being written as courting songs or as, you know, just celebrations of somebody for a reason, you know, whether that was a specific anniversary or something, I don't know. But I do think that's going to be the next phase in this research, is trying to pinpoint who was it that was singing them and who was it that was writing them and why. And was there like a specific reason, or is this a mixture of reasons that kind of come out in similar types of songs? So the answer is no, I don't know, but that is a really interesting area for exploration.
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, I think that brings us neatly to 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock we start again. Okay. So I'd like to have a round of applause for all the speakers who have